Hi there and welcome back to Japan, where I have a very special guest today. And I'm actually really looking forward to this because this is quite different from, I think, anything that we've done up to this point. We've had so many people, but the way that this conversation started was actually I got contacted by you. So I'm going to say hello. We are just, in case anyone was wondering, yes, we are going to be talking a lot about BangDream because the 6th anniversary BangDream comes up this week. You already know that. But first of all, so you actually invited me to an interview first of all.
Yes.
So
for my own research.
Yeah, so you are doing research into BangDream. Can you give me a little bit of just an intro into how that started, how you came to be doing that?
I have a friend. She's doing research on Japanese anime culture and especially Japanese 2.5 dimension stage plays. For example, like Haikyuu, they have manga. And they have stage plays as well. And she, at this stage, she wanted to do something like Seiyu idol.
Oh yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, that's kind of like when you have the real person.
Yeah. So as a fan of BangDream, I introduced this whole project to her. And we said, yes, we can co-work. I can provide you with a lot of interviews and my friends also as well as my own experience as part of the BangDream fandom. And she can, to some extent, she can theorize it to fit her own projects. So I think it's a win-win project. So we started doing this research.
It's a big subject though, BangDream, because like you say, I mean, as you pointed out, that the whole thing about that kind of, I don't even know if I want to say idol, but that kind of thing is that they have both a animated persona, an animated side with a storyline and everything, but then they do also have the real person as a separate thing that appears on stage. That's a big subject. I mean, how do you feel kind of about straddling those two things? I mean, where does your fandom come down?
I have to admit, at the very beginning, I was not intrigued by the anime or the manga or the mobile game. I was actually intrigued by a video clip. A video clip by Raise A Suilen. Yes, when I was watching YouTube online. And I think that at that time, I was listening to Rammstein, the heavy metal band.
The German heavy metal band as well.
Yeah, the German heavy metal band. Yeah. And I was listening to them and YouTube just recommended me. I thought it's very random, but they recommended me Raise A Suilen. I can't remember which song. I assume it might be a declaration of maybe that one.
I think that's kind of like the one that leads them in for most people. I don't know why, but that was always the one when I was looking at Raise A Suilen, who were not the first BangDream artist I noticed. That was the one that always kept coming up.
Probably that one, but I can't remember now. And I clicked that one, and it's a Japanese rock band. Oh, it's a full girl Japanese rock band. And I have to admit, I was instantly intrigued by Rachel's voice. That is so unique in the Japan rock bands, I think. And then I started to watch quite a lot of their video clips.
But because that's kind of interesting, because as you mentioned, like Rachel's voice is quite different from even the rest of the kind of BangDream artists. They have more, what I guess you'd say, the stereotypical cute voices. Did you find that was kind of like a bridge that got you into other BangDream artists, or was that how did you feel about making that connection? Because you are starting from Rammstein. I just want to remind everyone we're going from Rammstein to Pop-In Party. There's a bit of a conversion here.
On the one hand, I'm a scholar, so I think it's natural for me just to research things. Just into things. That is one hand, and on the other hand, I'm also a music lover, and also I consume lots of Japanese music. Before I get this interview with you, I was still listening to. Have you ever heard of Garnet Crow?
Actually, that's only a name for me. I don't know any of their music.
Okay, so it's like they have already disbanded in 2013. So it's yeah, it's like new melody band, like something Enya might do if she's doing a band. So I was still listening to them. So I'm a heavy music consumer for any kinds of music. So I think it's natural for me to, it's a band project. It's an anime band project. It's called BangDream. So I naturally dig into other bands like Roselia and the Popping Party, and of course Mofonica, and to watch their live performance.
Yeah.
Although I have to admit, my favorite is still Raise a Suilen.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be the go-to one. I certainly have noticed that they've Raise a Suilen seem to have the largest, I think, reach to overseas markets. And I've said this a lot of the time, actually, that and there's been a conversation that's come up in a few different contexts on this channel, is that I think sometimes when it comes to the higher pitched female voices in Japan, I've been kind of a defender that often they're seen as thin when they're not always thin at all. In fact, I did a whole video about this only yesterday where I had diagrams and everything to prove my point. But the thing is that I think that a lot of the time those voices are not as popular in Western audiences. I think you need to have that more full voice, even if you're a female singer, to bridge that gap. So I think Raise a Suilen in a better position to do that than perhaps any of the BangDream artists.
Yeah, I think for Popping Party and for Mofonica, probably the voice of the vocalist more catering to Asian audience. It's more cute and more soft, and probably Raise a Suilen and also Roselia voice is kind of covering whole the full range. And also because Rachel, she's a professional singer rather than hear you first. So that I think we talked about that before. Like that is why it seems Raise a Suilen appeals to the overseas market, especially the Western market, more than the other bands.
I do kind of see, I like your idea almost of grading the voices, like Raise a Suilen, like the most international, and then you kind of got Roselia in that they've got enough singers that they can cross a lot of boundaries, and then as you get to like Poppin' Party, it's much more Asian, because obviously Poppin' Party, they did a song with Silent Siren, and so many people said to me, because I don't know if you know, there's a company called JPU Records, and their whole thing is, you say you know them, they bring Japanese artists to Western audiences, and so many people were saying to me, oh, Howard, you should like recommend Silent Siren to JPU, and I'm kind of, my point was that no, I don't think they would have the cross appeal into a Western market at all. And yet if you look at their popularity in Asia, like Silent Siren, they were popping over to like Taiwan, Hong Kong, Malaysia. They were very popular in Asia. So I think there is just that sort of West-East divide in what kind of female voices carry with what kind of audiences.
I think yes, although we need to anti-stereotype, but I sometimes I think probably some stereotypes exist for a reason. And because just according to my own observation, I think something like a more powerful voice, like both like Rachel and Aiba Aina, the vocalist of Roselia, they're not that cute, not that soft, but they more like, I hate that word, but they more like the vocalist of a traditional band.
I think one of the things that's kind of noticeable once you're already into Japanese or Asian music is you notice when it's real and when it's not. So for example, a lot of people from a Western audience, like you say, there's that negative stereotype where I think they hear a high-pitched voice and they immediately think like it's kind of an AKB48 situation, whereas when you look at something like Poppin' Party or Silent Siren, I don't think that they're leaning into deliberately being cute. I think they've just kind of got that singer because they naturally have a high-pitched, a very sort of delicate voice. Not to say they don't sing powerfully, but that they have a sort of more approachable sound. But yeah, it does seem like the thing that seems to be really working for Western audiences right now is artists who they can convey the kind of approachability of Japanese bands, but at the same time have like the actual ass-kicking sound that you get from like a Rachel, or obviously we talk a lot about Bandmade on this channel. Bandmade, you know, the Made outfits, but a lot of the sort of vocal power, it's all very honest rock music. I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think people just kind of want to hear that combination. So do you think the BangDream is really kind of that's a progression, that's where music is going for the Japanese Western crossover? Do you think BangDream is going to be leading that forwards?
I think the BangDream whole project is quite experimental.
Yeah.
And Raise a Suilen is part of this experiment. And to some extent, it proves such kind of music will have the audience outside Japan.
Yeah.
And I think the whole project is doing more experiments on its way. For it will release a new band, although we have no idea what it is, what kind of, it will release a new band probably in 2 months. They have already announced that. And there is also another virtual band, My Go. So they have real band, they have real cast, but they do not show up who they are, who are the cast. So they have official video clips.
Like I say, with artists like those who are much more, it's leaning towards the virtual side over the real band side. Do you think that might be that BangDream are trying to go more in that direction, that they see more future in leaning into the anime side than perhaps getting into the already competitive rock side?
To be honest, I really don't know. If we just looking at My Go, the virtual reality band, who perform on stage without their face. But there is still a new band coming in 1 or 2 months. So to be honest, I don't know which side they are leaning to, or probably they are leaning both sides. Or because it's already quite to some extent, I think it's quite avant-garde to have a band that is both having professional artists and seiyuu idols combined together. This concept, I think, to some extent, it is very avant-garde, but we really don't know like what might coming out. Whether the Bushiroad, the company, whether they want more money from otaku or want more money from music fans.
I think Bushiroad will follow wherever the music is coming from. So you made an interesting point that we discussed before this conversation about festivals. And it is very true, because at the moment, I mean, in Japan, you see the adverts, you know full well that Bushiroad and BangDream are very much focused on things like animation, on mobile games. But you're absolutely right, which is that they're raking in a good amount of money by going to these festivals as well, which are really good earners for bands like this. So I think they're probably diversifying it. And now you've come to mention it, I'm wondering whether we're going to get, so we've got like this fully animated band. I wonder if the next band they announce is going to be the diametric opposite. It'll be like a totally live band with a very limited animated. I wonder if they're going to do something like that, where they try and take both opposite approaches, perhaps.
Scarcely, I think, because like at the very beginning, they said that Raise a Suilen won't be animated. There will there will only be live performance of this band. But like what happened in the end, I think it's hardly possible that they will do a band without animation. Probably they will do that for the men's band. Probably I think that is possibility, because the BangDream, the boys side, is not as popular as the girl sets, which means they can be more experimental.
That's a good idea, actually. They could, I mean, if they reversed track on Raise a Suillen already, it sounds like they learnt their lesson in advance, and so they probably, if they did that, tried that once and it didn't work, I suspect probably they won't try that again. But yeah, I think that it's kind of interesting though, because you mentioned that you're not really from the anime side of things, and I'm very much the same. I mean, my approach to BangDream was very much from being a music reviewer. That's how I got into it. And you know, at the same time though, obviously they do seem to be focused towards this anime side of things. As you mentioned, even when they tried to do a band about animation, it just ended up becoming animation anyway. Do you feel like the whole BangDream thing has made you more interested in animation? Do you feel like you've sort of gone into that side of the culture at all, or is that still something very separate for you?
I think if it is for the animation and for the mobile game per se, I would say I'm not into that. I'm not into that at all.
Yeah.
Although I have watched the animation, so see 3 seasons,
Research.
but yeah, for the sake of research. And yeah, and for the mobile game, although I have the account, but I haven't logged in for like a couple of years, probably. Yeah, but but when it comes to its seiyuu and the fandom, I think sometimes I will watch like BangDream TV. Yeah, I will watch like the seiyuu broadcasting or seiyuu events, and you know, like for the fandom, I say probably for the fandom, like maybe 50% or 60% fandom here in China. We are up for the seiyuu more than for the character, but there are still some, you know, like they are more into the character, especially I think for Roselia. They are animated character. They are very popular.
Really? That's interesting. So you think on a band by band basis, if their animated characters are popular, then they become a thing of their own. Whereas with some, so I guess it depends on whether the real life people or the animated characters, they kind of have 2 chances of getting popular, and whichever one becomes more popular.
Yes, like for Roselia, like both their animated character and the cast, they're all very popular, and they have different their fandom to some extent different, but there is overlapping.
Yeah. We noticed this a lot when baby metal broke out in the rest of the world. It was interesting because when they first broke out into mainstream popularity, they had obviously they were really balancing on that whole thing of, we are a young girl band, but we're doing heavy metal music. And so the fandom was this real mixture. And of course, as time went on, they found that there was more, I'm assuming, more profitability in the metal side, maybe more longevity in the metal side. And so they've kind of lent more towards that. And I guess growing up as well. But yes, I think there was certainly a period where their concerts were very much populated with 2 very different audiences at the same time.
Do they have, do they quarrel?
Sorry, do they?
Do they quarrel, like quarrel against each other, the idol fans and the heavy metal fans?
Do you know what? I've always wanted to know that. I hope someone can get in the comments and tell me. I mean, I didn't really, when I first heard of baby metal was around the time they were in that phase. But that was before I really had the opportunity to get into the fandom, certainly go to any of the shows. And by the time I'd really got access to that whole community, they kind of settled into their second album and a much more metal focused approach. But I would have loved to have been there, especially at like the Japanese shows, like just as they came out, and just the confusion of what audience are we playing to here? So, I mean, because they were a subunit of a traditional sort of cutesy school girl band initially, and then they were like, oh, here's the different subunits of this bigger pop unit, because of course there was about 20,000 of them, which is the normal in Japan, and then their subunit was the heavy metal one, but then it ended up becoming its own group. So there must have been some handover phase between the glow stick the glow stick mafia who love to go to their idol concerts, and the heavy metalers turning up, you know, big guts and big shirts and long hair. There must have been some handover between those two, which I would have loved to have seen.
Yeah, I really love to see like different sort of audience. They sometimes mingle together, or sometimes they have conflicts with each other, because actually it happens to the BangDream fandom here.
Really?
Yeah.
How so? Can you describe is it the break between the anime fans and the sort of the more rock fans, or?
Yeah, I think it's probably like 2 years ago. Like 2 years ago on Weibo, the Chinese, like the Chinese version of Twitter, they have this argue against like again, not against the Raise A Suilen, but about Raise A Suilen. So because you know, some of the fans, they are from the music side.
Yeah.
But yes, not from the animation side. So some of the fans, they are not into the later period of Raise A Suilen's music.
Oh, I see. So they feel like the band may have stepped away or betrayed what they originally liked about them.
Yeah, kind of like that. You know, it happens a lot of time to music fans. Like, for example, I love Adele's 25, but I don't like her recent album. So that's quite normal.
You hear phrases like "you sold out," things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite normal for music fans, but for some idol fans or for the animation fans, they focus quite a lot on these performance, and these artists, they have already endeavored to perform on stage. You cannot criticize them.
I must admit, actually, I'm going to throw something a little bit different in here, because I've really had my first ever experience of this. Now, I'm going to kind of experience it more, hopefully, this weekend, depending on how things go, which is talking of the animation. Now, again, you and I both are the same on this. We've never really understood the animation. So even living in Japan, I've watched no anime. And then I watched the first anime that I think I've seen for about 20 years, after the pressure of my own YouTube followers got me to watch Bocce the Rock. I think a lot of people have heard about this. So basically, for anyone who somehow doesn't know and is following this channel, shorthand, it's basically about a group of women in Japan, young women who set up and make a band, and it's just about that whole formation process, but it is notably very much based on a sort of an accurate depiction of what that style of life is like, whilst also having a lot of anime tropes. Anyway, point is, I've really enjoyed that. And on one of my channels, people have actually asked me to review the episode, so I've started reviewing an anime, which is completely foreign for me. I had no idea where to start from that. But I also had been reviewing the songs, because they had an album, and started reviewing the songs for my main channel, which is obviously the music focused one. And then it came up recently, just a discussion about, oh, check this out. This is by the person who is the guitarist in Bocce the Rock. And suddenly I noticed this very weird feeling seeing them as a real person. And I was like, this is what it is. This is what these people are feeling. It's a very strange feeling. And this weekend, there's going to be some sort of live streamed performance, which is going to be the actual members of the band. And it is very curious, because it is true that you can be given an animated persona that you almost sort of, I think when you get into that, you almost feel like, well, this song is about this character feeling this. So that when you hear it played by a bunch of musicians who, you know, they're acting, you know, they're really playing the song, but when it comes to the feeling of the song is now completely and utterly exposed as being an act. It's very interesting, because of course you hear most bands play, you don't know if their lyrics are literally their own life stories, but you feel it's personal. You see like Raise A Suilen do a song, and if the song is based on something that their characters have felt, then you would attach the feeling of the song to the character. So for me now, if I were to watch this live performance of Bocce the Rock's songs and they were singing lyrics that seem to be very much attached to one of the characters, it's going to be very bizarre. It's going to be very bizarre kind of associating that with the real musicians, I think. That's my initial feeling, obviously, having not seen it yet. But I do wonder whether anyone in your research has maybe given you an interesting perspective from that side that you didn't expect. Have you spoken to someone who's maybe seen it from an animation first side and maybe expressed why they struggled with the real life people?
I think during our research, and some of my friends, they are fans of Popping Party and Roselia. They might have, and I kind of getting your feeling when I was watching. Like, have you ever heard of K-On?
Oh yeah. I've been. That's enough. When everyone's saying once you finish with Bocce, go watch K-On.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, probably. I might have a very similar feeling as you had when I was watching the K-On cast performing. Although it's not like a real band because they still have the back band, backing. But I think the feeling is quite the same to what you might feel when watching the real band of Bocce performing. And I think the fans of Roselia and Popping Party, they might feel the same. I think it is because the stories of Roselia and Popping Party is written much better than Raise a Suilen. So
I see.
So yeah, the fans, they can be related not only to the cast but also to the character.
Because of course, as you mentioned, Raise a Suilen anyway, their storyline perhaps was more of an afterthought anyway, appearing.
Yes. Yes.
And I think there also might be a degree to which if you're a fan of these groups and then someone comes along who, like myself or like you, who's more just from the music side, it might almost feel like they're undercutting the thing you enjoy. Because the other example I was thinking is when it comes to movies, I like a good movie, but I've always hated behind the scenes things. Because when you see a movie, it's like you're the character. I enjoy watching your character. But then you see a behind the scenes thing and it just it explodes the whole world that you just disappeared into. You had that escapism and now it's been exposed almost. So I wonder if you're a fan of the anime, whether people coming along going, I don't know anything about the anime, I'm just a fan of the band, whether that might be a bit, it might be that feeling as well. This is a much deeper subject than I was expecting.
Yeah. It is.
I see why you're researching it now, actually. I really see why you're researching this. There's a lot to this. Yeah.
Like the relation between the character and the, it's more complicated because it also has the dimension of the music and it's a band. So it's not like, although we have other like 2.5 dimensional idol projects like Love Live, but it's totally different. So
yeah,
like for Love Live, it's very simple. You just to act as the anime character, and the more you are alike the anime character, the better for both you as a cast and the character. But for BangDream, it's much more complex, I would say.
I mean, I noticed with, so perhaps to use a slightly different example, I was, again, going back to maybe the Bandmade thing, as that's an easy place, as most of the people watching is probably no Bandmade, BangDream, so similar, Bandmade. The thing that I'd always said that I think is very key to their success is that they, as a band, they have a big image and it's very sort of over the top. But I've always felt with Bandmade, one of the things that sets them apart from perhaps a lot of maybe visual K bands is that Bandmade's whole image seems to be a very deliberate exaggeration of who they really are. So, for example, the bassist, she plays very aloof, very quiet, sits in the corner drinking. In real life, she does like to drink. She's naturally a bit quiet, but she overacts it on stage. And and the guitarist is perhaps a little bit more of the sort of sweet, cute, wants to be everyone's friend kind of person. And so she hams that up and sort of declares her love for the lead singer on stage. And it's very much that, which I feel makes it easier for them to manage it. And I also think that where you get some fans who really love them as their personas, if you're someone who just kind of likes them for them, there's a bridge there because you're kind of on different points of the same spectrum. Have you ever felt, I mean, Rammstein actually a rather interesting example of this. Have you ever felt that there are bands who maybe are very good at just kind of doing an exaggeration of themselves for their image rather than creating something totally new?
I think probably it's more of the Japan. I don't know whether it's a Japanese celebrity culture. So most of the celebrity on stage, they have their own personality, but there might be a little gap between who they really are and what they perform on TV, on screen, or on stage. But it won't be a very big gap. For example, like the guitarist of Raise A Suilen, Kohara Liko. She how to say, she's not that cute actually, so in both in her own personality and so you can see from her like her fan only live stream, so she's not that cute, and her stage style is quite, like we say, wild, probably.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's probably
wild.
easier for her to manage. It's less stress for her to have to worry about managing her persona that she's already kind of a similar.
But you know what's the interesting thing is her character, her enemy character is kind of a shy personality. So in performance, in the Raise A Suilen performance nowadays, she's trying to play that shyness more or less.
Really?
Yes.
So you can noticeably see that she is actually acting.
Yeah, she's kind of playing and acting that shyness on stage, but off stage, you can see her probably wildness again. So that kind of little gap making her more attractive to some of her fans. So I think that's the trick here.
So in one way you could use it, like say you could find a way of being an exaggeration of yourself which is more comfortable, but you could also create an image that is more appealing to, if you have a large male audience, then you can play up a certain side of that.
Not that contrasting. Not that
just
just a little bit trick. So that will,
that's the key to good marketing right there.
Yeah, I think that's the marketing strategy. And similarly, like Iba Aina, the vocalist of Roselia, like she has the very cool image because she's performing Minaki Yukina. So she's kind of the very cool, stable stage style when she's performing, but herself as the vocalist, as the cast, she's very into things like the horse race gambling in real life. So that kind of different personality, different image, actually helping them to attract different fans. So I think that's how they manage or operating their image.
You actually reminded me of something really quite amusing, because we were talking before about how if you really want to gauge Japanese pop culture, the best way is to go and look at a row of gacha machines and see which gacha machines are most popular. And there's this anime which has been popping up in a lot of them recently, and I didn't know what it was until my friend who owns a comic book shop and is really on top of this kind of stuff explained it to me. There's an anime currently in Japan where all of the characters, it's a cast of all female cast, typical young anime girls, but they all have ears and they're all actually horses.
Oh,
And
yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that. That's originally from a mobile game.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, that's phenomenal right now.
So it's really popular. And I just looked at it, and I think maybe if I'd saw that 10 years ago, I would have been bewildered. But now I look at it and I go, yep, that sounds about right. That's should have guessed that would happen. Yep, that sounds about right. So I'll give them this. They are creative with their bizarre ideas. But yeah, I think there is this desire in Japan for always having some kind of bizarre concept, some weird thing that you could just I mean, we've known about this for years in Japan with all kind of pop culture things, everything from like Gudetama being an animated egg, all the way up through you kind of have like the crazy, obviously the mascot characters, you have all the bizarre anime things we've seen. It's a very big thing, I think, in Japan to have something a little bit of a concept, an idea, a thing that is unique above and beyond just whatever your art form may be. So you could write a nice story about a group of women, or you could make more horses. You could start a nice band and have them play music, or you could make them animated characters with a super dramatic storyline, probably going beyond the realms of reality. I mean, I guess it's just adding an extra layer to these things. I mean, do you feel it ever detracts from the music? Do you ever feel like when they're trying so hard to be unique that maybe it gets in the way of just making music? Or
you mean like for the horse girls, or like for everything?
Hey, look, I don't know if they make music, but if they do, I'm checking it out. Just for anything, do you feel that sometimes like there's way too much of the concept stuff, or do you think it's just kind of, it makes it more or less, I guess you'd say?
I think it's just their culture or their tradition make them so, and I don't say it's all good or it's bad. I think it's but to me, I would just think whether it will attract me or not. So like for the horse girl thing, I downloaded the game and played it for probably 2 weeks.
Really?
I don't find it attractive enough for me to play it.
What actually is? Can you quickly describe what this game is? Sorry, my brain is like.
So it's also a gacha game. So you gacha these girls. They have like SR, SSR, some like. Also, they have this grading ranking system, and you race these horse girls, and they will race for you.
They just like run around a racetrack with the ears on.
Yes.
This is fantastic. Yes. This is what the Olympics should look like. And next time they have the Olympics in Japan, it's like now the horse racing, and it'll just be all humans with ears on. That's
you have to admit they are very, very creative.
Like I say, I went from a period where perhaps, because when I grew up, like I grew up in a sort of a period where everyone of my specific age group was really into anime, specifically like the Dragon Ball things, and Pokemon was a big thing. Everyone a couple of years older, my brother's age, were all into like American wrestling and things. And I was never into whatever was the super popular thing. I think that kind of jaded me against anime for quite a while. And so as a result, I kind of got
to just little rebel.
Well, it's more a case of like when you kind of, I don't know, when you, I don't want to say, oh, I didn't fit in, because that sounds so artiste. Oh, I didn't fit in with the others. It wasn't like that. I wasn't like one of the popular kids. And so as a result, I kind of just felt like, if everyone else is into it, I guess I'm not. And so, it was interesting though, that over time, there's still a lot of anime things where I just think, no, I can't get into that. But then there's little things where I go, actually, do you know what? I really see the charm in that. And I think this horse racing girl thing, I would have seen that as very cynical 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. But now I look at it and I just think that's brilliant. I like that. I don't know what it is. I don't care if I'm even going to enjoy it. Just I'm happy someone made that. Just so I can point at it and go, that exists.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, but actually one question I should probably ask, because this is, you mentioned obviously about knowing, so you're in China at the moment, so I didn't ask, whereabouts in China are you?
In the Guangdong.
Okay, okay. So now, I guess, I mean, I don't hugely know the regional side of things, so this might be useful anyway. But you mentioned about the fact that you have managed to communicate with a lot of people, I'm assuming in your area, who have some kind of knowledge of BangDream and things like that. Is Japanese culture, I mean, how prevalent is Japanese culture in China? Do you find there's a lot of this kind of thing over there, or people are really into a lot of Japanese things?
Oh, nowadays, yes.
Really?
So, yeah. In like cities like Beijing or Shanghai or Guangzhou, that's quite popular. So, yeah. So if you go to some places in Shanghai, you might feel yourself going to Akihabara.
Really?
Yeah, it's quite
Wow.
the same. You have those gacha machines, and you have those shops selling the goods of different animation. So yes, especially in Shanghai, I would say they have this anime related concert in Shanghai for like a couple of years.
Really?
Probably since 2016 or 2017. So there are many famous Japanese singers. They went there, but because of the COVID, now it's all online. So yes, I think it's just these 10 years this industry has become prosperous in China and in big cities in China, but not as the time when I was a young kid. So although the TV programs will broadcast animations like Dragon Ball or Saint Seiya on our TV, but like 20 years ago. But in general, animation and the mangas were seen as a bad thing. And elementary school, but now it's different. Now I think it's quite important industry right now. Not only Japanese culture, not only Japanese animation and manga, and also manga and animation produced here in China. They are becoming more and more phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like for example, there are you can see there's a lot of cross appeal now. There was this mobile game who through various connections, I know someone who plays this mobile game which you might have heard of, which is like called Genshin, and it's
it's a Chinese game.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that I saw it, and then from everything I was like, oh, Japanese, it looks Japanese, everything's Japanese about it. And then I started hearing the character names. I was like, a lot of these sound like these Chinese character names. This is interesting. And then I started reading more and more about it. I was like, this is full on Chinese. This is, I mean, it's got like, they pick like little Korean influences and put them in, Japanese influences, put it in. Now, I've never played it myself, but like I said, I've seen it. And it's very much, it's like a Pan-Asian kind of thing, even though it looks like anime. It's very Pan-Asian, and you can see, as you mentioned, that it's definitely coming from China, but that they've picked up a lot of influences and they've knowingly kind of curated a sense of a bit of Japan, a bit of Korea, and put it all into this. So I can definitely see that. But one of the things that intrigued me is because you mentioned about in the last 10 years, and that's actually a big factor, because I think so many things have happened in the last 10 years. I mean, we've had honestly about 15 years of modern social media at this point, you know, sort of since like the Facebook thing, I think was when most people started really getting an idea for what modern social media was going to be. We've had about 15 years of that, obviously nearly 20 years of YouTube, but that was, again, that took a while to kick off. But also, you know, we've had 10 years since K-pop really kicked off. Around the same time, you had baby metal, the internet speeds have increased massively over 10 years. I get the feeling that the world has become much smaller in a way now, by which these Asian markets are much more open to the world, and people are much less scared of, you know, foreign language this, foreign language that, you know, foreign language movies and music. It's much more appealing to a wider audience. And I think whereas like K-pop really sort of burst onto the scene with like a lot of big hit singles and very much the fashionable look, I feel like Japan has kind of more just stayed to being Japanese, but people have started to sort of understand a lot of the qualities of Japanese music and start to enjoy it more. Do you think that it is that Japanese music is becoming more appealing to Western audiences, or do you think there's actually something to this, that it's changing maybe for Western audiences or overseas audiences, or do you just feel like people as a general are more open to overseas art and music than they were before?
Well, that's a really big question for me to answer.
I told you they weren't all going to be easy. We've been too soft up until this point.
I don't the Japanese audience and the artists, they are ready. But comparing to how to say, like comparing to Korean artists, I think the Japanese music market is still quite local, or quite Asian, I would say. So like for the Korean artists, for when I was in London a couple of years ago, the BTS were the most famous Korean boys band. They came to Wimbledon and have this concert, and the traffic was horrible.
Was it Wimbledon or Wembley?
Wimbledon.
It was Wimbledon.
Sorry. Wembley. Sorry.
I'm just going to check, because Wimbledon is a very small tennis court. Wembley is a massive arena.
Wembley.
Really care.
Wembley. And I happened to live there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't go to the concert, but the traffic was horrifying.
Yeah.
I can't even go to the supermarket nearby because there's full of people. And ex-Japan, they have also held a concert like in 2017 or 2016, and I've been to ex-Japan's concert, and the stadium was not full.
Yeah.
So I won't say that will represent that Japan's pop culture or pop music is not as famous as the Korean K-pop, but I have this feeling that the K-pop is more globalized and approaching a wider audience because of its style. And
yes.
And they offer, for them, like most of them, they are like Girls' Generation, and so they offer English version of their songs. Each one, they have the Korean version, sometimes Japanese version, and English version. So well, I think,
I absolutely agree. It's a really good point. I mean, we were talking a lot about artists sort of expanding into other countries, and that was a topic that we came up with as well, was, is doing an English language version better? And I think if you are appealing to a mainstream audience, then doing an English language version is better. Whereas if you're staying in a niche audience, it might actually be detrimental. So you look at like bands like Baby Metal, and Baby Metal did some English language versions of their songs, and the fans went, no, actually, we don't really like that. And admittedly, they didn't do them in a very good way, but still, I mean, it was interesting. The fans were just kind of, we didn't ask for this. And this, to me, was kind of an interesting point, because really, the point I keep on coming back to is I think that K-pop is such a massive phenomenon. It's such a huge thing, and it's had such a massive effect that I can't help but feel that it is very reminiscent of things like before, like when we had nu metal, when we had disco in the 70s, pop punk, original rock and roll. We're talking about genres that completely dominated the charts, but then they were too successful. And as a result, a generation comes along who are like, oh no, that's what my older sister listens to. I don't want to listen to that. And then immediately the genre just gets killed. It's like it's gone from being massive to just disappearing overnight. Whereas I feel like Japanese music, I mean, even if you look at Baby Metal, who are the biggest thing currently out of Japan still, then they're nowhere near as big as BTS. I mean, BTS are a household name. Everyone knows them. But, outside of music fans, not everyone knows who Baby Metal is. And I think that's actually an advantage. I think being still a bit of a niche, more
Yes,
longevity.
yeah, I totally agree with you. Because in terms of diversity, the diversity of music styles and music genres, I think the Japanese market get the niche. So you can find, if you love baby metal, you have baby metal, and also you have other heavy metal bands like have you heard of Love Bites?
Oh yes, actually, I first covered them like about 4 years ago, and then I just didn't follow up on it. And recently, I've been covering them a lot more. Really
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Really good.
and they just got this new bass player, and who I followed on YouTube as well.
Yeah, she's a YouTuber.
Yeah,
What a brilliant idea.
yeah, and yeah, I really love her, and I also think that why Love Bites chose her, because they want to bring about more audience, because she's a YouTuber. So, and if you have like very mainstream music, you have Yaosobi, for example, mainstream in Japan.
Yeah, exactly. She's
Yeah.
mainstream in Japan, but I think that wouldn't serve her as well
Oh,
overseas because
yeah,
it's
no.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interest. I mean, the family thing, like you say, I think that is actually an example of a very good choice, because I mean, Love Bites had managed to expand massively. I think from the fact that they had quality on their side, they had like a really great singer, really good musicianship, but I think they were always they were just needed that extra little thing that maybe pushed them a little bit further into that kind of fun niche territory. And for me, the really telling photograph was the first photograph they released with Fami as the bassist. And it was just in the studio, and all of them were posing, like looking cool, like they always do. And Fami standing there grinning, holding her guitar like this. And I thought, that photograph in my mind was one of I think, I'm not saying they posed for it, but I'm saying that I think the person who released that photograph knew that photograph was the perfect choice, because it said, we're still us, but we've gone and added this, which no one's expecting, and this is fun. And by adding Fami, who clearly had a different look and a different feel, it just suddenly made the band so much more interesting than they already were. And yeah, I thought that photograph was a genius move. It was a really good choice.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to their new live performance and the new albums as well. And
have you heard any of it? Have you heard any of the new songs then?
Not yet. I have to check their new songs. So their
Check
new songs is already released.
They've been putting out a few over the last month. They were very quick to get songs out after the Fami information was starting to come through. I believe I've been told by some diehard fans that a lot of it had been pre-written, and then Fami kind of played stuff that had already been written, but she added a little bit of personality. So for example, a couple of the songs you'll hear like a few bars of bass intro that clearly was not there originally, but they were like, well, we've got a new bassist, so give her the intro. But yeah, it's interesting because it's very much Love Bites. It still sounds like Love Bites, but there is just that little side. It feels like different enough that you're like, okay, I see you've taken a step. Nice.
Yeah, and probably Fami will be the booster for Love Bites to become more popular.
Well, you're right about her presence online as well. Yeah.
Yes, and both in Japan and overseas, because Fami is such a famous YouTuber.
I think I believe that Davey504, the famous YouTube
bassist, I know.
I think he
reviewed her lots of times, I think.
he was as angry as ever when he saw her. But he actually, now I believe he went to Singapore recently. I might be totally wrong. He went somewhere in Asia. I think it was Singapore. He went to do a live show with a couple of Asian violinists, I believe, or something. So he's been out there as well. He's been trading on that. And it is true. Like you get popular on YouTube, you can start doing live shows just based on your YouTube career.
Yeah.
So becoming then the bassist of an already very much up and coming band is just that's a win-win for everyone. Everyone's winning there.
And for everyone, I think, who played music and who loves music. And for that, I think the Japan music culture is really more diversified. You can have whatever you want, whatever kind of music you want. And like I said, you have love bites, and for more mainstream, you have what was their name? The Second Action.
Oh, Second Action, yeah. That's interesting.
They are quite famous in China, and they have they're quite famous in China. And you have a more niche choice if you love like Tokyo Jiken.
Oh yeah, but they've because that's the whole Sheena Ringo connection. They've been around for a while, and they've kind of got like a very firm fan. They're one of those ones. If I post any video about Tokyo Jihen, then in the first day it'll get like 50 views, but then I come back 5 months later and it's got like 10,000 views because it's just being viewed regularly by a small number of people every day. So they've got a very strong fan base of maybe not so much the current thing, but there's a lot of their fans bouncing around, definitely.
And for example, like I mentioned, the one I mentioned, Garnet Crow, although they have already disbanded in 2013, but now on YouTube there are still fans covering their songs. So
I love that though. I love that when you get that kind of
thing. So I think although the K-pop, I love K-pop. Especially I love Mamamoo. Have you heard of them?
Yeah. One of the people on my Discord community, he was like, I was like so busy with reviews, and every day he was posting Mamamoo's videos like, Howard, you've got to do this. And it became like a running meme. I was like, I can't listen to any of them until I got time to really concentrate on it. But every day I was seeing like the entire discography of Mamamoo coming up. So yeah, I did eventually get around to that.
Mamamoo, they are kind of the niche market inside Korea. They are not that mainstream. They're not that popular comparing to girls' generation or BTS. And like in general, they are more they are more endeavored to approach the international market. But for the Japanese market, the Japanese music, it's more feel like I'm here, I'm right here. We have everything. Yeah. We are welcoming you to dig into what we have. That's my kind of feeling.
I want to bring up a quick comparison then, as you mentioned about Mamamoo and that sort of less mainstreaming career, but the ability to kind of bridge the gap. Are you familiar with Dreamcatcher?
Nope.
Okay. This might be one worth mentioning then. So Dreamcatcher are a K-pop group, very K-pop in all their looks, but basically they started doing very sort of rock-based K-pop. You know, it's all the dance moves. You know how every K-pop video looks exactly the same. It was like that, but darker. And but they had like proper rock music, really well done. And then they started, you get a lot of K-pop groups have always gone over to Japan and done like a Japanese version. They started really focusing on Japan, like doing Japan only releases and stuff like that. And you could kind of tell that they were aware that this whole pop meets heavy rock thing is very much a Japanese staple, something that Japan really likes. And they were like, okay, well, let's do K-pop meets rock. And they really started putting that out. And they appear to have had some good success across the board, not massive, but they seem to have been able to gain both a Korean and Japanese audience, which I think is it's not as common as perhaps it's often perceived. I mean, obviously you get big artists like you have something like Twice. You're going to hear Twice in Japan quite a lot, but that's just because they are massive. But and of course Twice, now their most popular song entirely in English. Interesting choice. It's like, your most popular song, you didn't even have a Korean version ready. So okay.
Well, it's Twice also quite popular, like internationally.
The problem is I've been for someone who's traveled like to so many countries, I haven't left Asia once in the last 7 years. I've been all over Asia in the last 7 years, but I haven't been back to Europe, America, or anywhere. So like my knowledge of the Western world is now very limited and based on what I hear reports coming from the West. But certainly like Twice, they are if I were to say which artist do I hear most in Japan, just walking around on the radio, definitely of the K-pop artists, Twice, 100%. Because I think they appeal to, in Japan, there is this focus on melody. And a lot of K-pop groups are very rhythm-based, whereas Japan, melody is held in a higher esteem, I'd say. And I think that Twice are more melody-focused than a lot of their compatriots. I mean, you compare Twice to BTS, and I think Twice have more melodic songs than BTS do, and I think that just appeals to the Japanese audience as a general.
Because many of Twice members are Japanese girls.
I think that helps. I mean, that helped with Niziu, but then Niziu were marketed as a Korean-Japanese crossover. That was very central to it. But with Twice, I think, to be honest, I think with Twice, ever since the incident with the Taiwanese flag, they've kind of been very careful not to overly play the international card. That was kind of the end of that.
And probably they will lose the ticket to play in China, to perform in China.
So they don't really talk about their nationalities quite so much now. Because if the Japanese girls start talking about that, everyone's going to be looking at her like, what are you going to say? So I think that kind of put an end to that angle. But yeah, I think initially that helped them blow up at first. It's kind of interesting, actually. I should point this out. I didn't think about that before, but after that whole incident occurred, it was only a year after that Niziu appeared. So I almost feel like someone went, look, we can't do this Twice thing. We have to change the Twice thing. Let's do another international group. All right, push it harder this time. Niziu. Everyone will forget that Twice did that. So yeah, I think that was kind of the way that they, because I think it's all the same way, JYP or something, isn't it? The company who does all this, if I'm right. They basically manage all of the K-pop groups, I think. I might be wrong.
And how was the acceptability of the Japanese audience of like Twice and Mizu? Because I've heard, I might be wrong, but I've heard that on the, sorry, what's the name of their New Year concert? I've
been caught out now. I can't remember.
Yeah, I forgot. Whatever. So it's like the girls and the boys, they contact each other. That they are the biggest thing in their New Year's Eve. That one. So they appeared. Both Twice and Mizu appeared on that concert. But I've heard that many Japanese audience, they don't buy it.
Well, this has always been a complicated thing in Japan as a general. Now, obviously, I would defer to anyone who obviously grew up here and is maybe more in touch with the culture and that side. But certainly from having like lived here for years and really focusing in and talking to people in that side of the culture, my perception has always been that, again, that you have that layer of the people who are into music and perhaps the people who are, more general audiences, which becomes an issue when you're a household name. I think that a lot of these K-pop groups are popular just because they do have good melodies, they have catchy songs, and they do their songs in Japanese on occasion as well, which shows a little bit of respect for the culture you're going into, so that appeases them as well. But there is also there is this kind of subset of people in Japan who, and I think, sometimes you get these subsets who are very noisy, and so they look bigger than they really are. But there is this whole subset of people who are very anti-Korean. But then again, having spent a lot of time in Korea, there's a lot of people who are very anti-Japanese there, and you can imagine exactly the sorts of things both sides say in these conflicts. Yes. But yeah, there is always going to be that very vocally anti-Korean and anti-Japanese rhetoric on both sides, which comes to the surface when you have a household name like this. I would say, though, that from my experience, the vast majority of people are actually very, like, now Japan is very open to Korean culture, much more than it would have been 10 years ago. And Korea is actually very open to Japanese culture. I mean, not as much. The Koreans are more resistant, they're more protective of their culture, I think, than most countries, but they seem to be much more open to Japanese things than I think they've been for a very long time. So I think that as generations pass, that kind of appreciation for the artistic endeavors of both countries is increasing. But yeah, I would certainly say there is always, I mean, one of the things, you go to any major railway station in Japan, especially in Tokyo, there'll always be this one particular like group of people who'll turn up every now and then, and they'll park their little tiny vans outside the station, and they'll have hundreds of Japanese flags all over their vans, and then they'll get up on the top and they'll start speaking into a megaphone. And if you take time to sit down and listen to them, half the time what they're talking about is how they want all the Koreans to leave their country. And it's like, wow.
But not you.
Well, I take a lot of pleasure in standing directly in front of the vans and just sort of like maybe getting myself something to eat and just eating and watching like, what's that about foreigners? Okay. So you like me, but you don't like them. That's interesting.
So it's just like the political lobby.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they have some kind of political, but you get that in. I mean, the same thing. You have Brexit in the UK, and I totally understand there's two sides to that. Although personally, I was all for staying in the EU. I totally respect everyone has different views on these things, and I think the minute you start getting up on a van with a megaphone is the kind of the point where people have to look at you and go, maybe you're not listening to both sides of this argument as much as you should. Maybe you've become a little bit too surrounded by other people who believe the same thing as you. So yeah, I think there's always going to be those people in Japan who you bring anything Korean over, and they're going to be like, no. It's just there's going to be that kind of folks. Well, I imagine you probably get that in China though, because you mentioned about Japanese things as well. I imagine there's got to be some people in China who probably are very resistant to Japanese stuff.
Yeah, it's always people. This really something really interesting. So Rachel, she's doing the cover channel on her YouTube. And,
yeah, I heard about this. Yeah.
Yes, and she's doing a covering song, and she uploaded it online, and there's a comment in Chinese that, "Whoa, are you a Chinese singer? You have such powerful voice, and you must cheer up." And I told that guy, "No, she's a Japanese singer." And he felt very awkward. I mean, he's like, so probably, I don't know, but like he assumes she's a Chinese singer, and she might be, and he might feel proud of her that becomes such a powerful, such a unique singer, a Chinese singer. But I just told him, no, she's a Chinese singer.
You're like,
that's
very us. I do remember this. I mean, this is a totally different story, but you just kind of reminded me and made me giggle a bit. I won't bore everyone who's probably heard this story before with the full thing, because I did a live chat directly after this incident. But there was an incident when I was in a bar in Akihabara, and it was just sort of like a few people drinking. It's kind of crowded. And there was this one guy who was causing a lot of problems. He was annoying a lot of women. And then he ended up getting in a fight with the security guard. And then the police had to come. And the police took the security guard and the guy away. And because I was standing right next to it, they were like, "Oh, can you give evidence?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll go down to the police station. Let me finish my drink." And the police officer had a drink with me. And then we both went back to the police station. But the end result, after about 4 or 5 hours of interrogation, was they were like, "Oh, thank you so much for helping," and everything. I was like, so actually the guy who started the fight, it's like, he's Chinese. I was like, okay. And like, so we're going to have to deport him. I was like, okay. But they were like, but his Japanese is really good. they were as impressed by the quality of his Japanese as they were annoyed about the crime. They were like, he's a terrible person. He's got to go. But his Japanese was amazing. And I just loved how much they were enamored by the quality of his So I've always said I'm never going to be that good at speaking Japanese, and obviously I'm never going to look Japanese, but I want to get to that point where I can get on a phone call and someone go, oh, your name is Howard. I can't imagine how you could be foreign. That's never going to happen.
You know what? It is the joke we had like for a couple of years. If you had done something not good in the Western countries, just say you are Japanese. Don't say you are Chinese.
Yeah, I mean, the Japanese have such a sort of mild, like they're seen by other countries as, oh, Japanese people are so polite, and you hear they go to sporting events and they clean up the stadium afterwards, and everyone thinks, oh, Japanese people are so lovely. And so as a result, that you can play on this. It's like just afterwards, it's like, oh, sumimasen, sumimasen, and then you get away with everything. I don't know if that works, but I want to see a Chinese person try that.
When I was in, I can't remember. When I was in, I think it's in Welsh. In
Wales.
Yeah,
Wales?
In Welsh. Yeah, I think I was misrecognized as Japanese like for several times. They were yes, in the Welsh bar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, like they first will say konnichiwa, and I said, because I know a little bit Japanese, and I'll say, yeah, konnichiwa. But later they found, oh, sorry, I don't know you are Chinese. I said, no, that's fine.
It's easy just reply. If they're Welsh, just reply and say, oh, don't worry. Well, I know how much you like haggis here. And then
I don't like the dish, by the way.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think I would like to see a survey of the Scottish to see how many Scottish people actually like haggis.
That reminds me, I was misrecognized as Korean in Glasgow.
That's interesting. I wonder if, because I can't imagine that happening sort of pre-Gangnam style, but I guess in the K-pop world we live now, that's kind of much more likely, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you're getting an annyeonghaseyo.
Yeah, yes. Yes, I think that is a seafood bar in Glasgow, and they said annyeonghaseyo, yeah, to me.
Oh no! Oh dear! You should just learn hello in a bunch of European languages. Just hello in German, hello in Italian. Just go for it. Sorry, white people, you all look the same to me. And then just lead with that. Oh, I love it. I mean, I in all fairness, if it's any use, I had a few Japanese friends in London. And of the two who worked in retail jobs, the one thing they always said was the number of times that they were working. There was one in particular, she worked in Regent Street, which is central London, and she worked in a shop that did like tea, so very stereotypical. And she said every day she'd have a Chinese tourist come into her and say ni hao, which I can't pronounce. Okay. She'd have that every time. She's like, oh, I'm Japanese. I'm sorry, I'm Japanese. I can't speak. She was like, she was like getting misrecognized a lot by other Asian people as well. So I think it's a problem across the board. Everyone's getting it. Oh dear. But so how long were you in the UK for?
Oh, since 2012.
Oh, okay. So really kind of that probably explains it. That was around the time when the whole kind of Asian influence was starting to really take over.
I think when I first arrived there was even the lecture by the Gangnam Style guy.
Oh.
In Oxford.
So I did not know, so I didn't. University
yeah, he was giving a lecture. Yeah.
I heard he's very smart, but I'm trying to get my head around that in all fairness. But yeah, I wonder if he did his little dance up to the front podium.
At that time, I was still in my little fandom, my little world of AKB.
Ah, okay. So you kind of had you had a bit of a J-pop thing from a younger age.
Yeah, at that time, we are doing the AKB dance together with my fandom friends.
Oh, that's nice. So, I mean, I haven't asked how old you are because naturally every Asian person I speak to looks younger than they actually are. So I cannot judge anyone's age. I've come to realize that now. But I mean, so how would you been like sort of? How old would you have been when you were in London? If I can
So
ask.
at that time I was 22.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
for- how do you look so much younger than me? Anyway, so it's not fair. Where's my hair gone? So this is kind of interesting though, because so you'd kind of really been exposed to Japanese music from a younger age then. So you'd been
Yes.
enjoying it from a young age. And
Yes.
so what I kind of want to ask this as a two-part question. Like, so who were your first Japanese musical kind of like inspirations, or just the Japanese musical people who you liked?
Well, that might be like when I was really, really young, probably. Have you heard of the animation Detective Conan?
Yes, very popular.
Yeah, very popular. So it's like of the national household manga now in Japan.
Yeah.
So I think I were introduced to many of their to because they have the up and ad singers.
Yes.
So this animation introduced me to bands like Bees.
Of course, yeah.
Yes. And that might be my starting point of Japanese animation, both Japanese animation and Japanese. Yes.
We did a survey a while ago about that, and a lot of people said it in front of them.
Yeah, and also at that time, I think my parents, because both my parents, they are music teachers.
Oh wow! Okay, yes.
They have this full collection of Japanese folk songs.
Okay.
Their folk song movement. So these Japanese artists, they use the acoustic guitar to create their own songs, like very similar to the Taiwanese folk Taiwanese folk movement. So they have a full collection of Japanese folk songs, and I also listen to that collection. I think that might be my enlightenment to Japanese music.
That's a really good point to come in, because I mean I was saying a second ago, you made a much more interesting point to follow that up. I mean, I was going to say a second ago that we did a survey asking people how they first found Japanese music, and a lot of people, not as many as I thought, but still a lot of people said they got into it through Japanese animation opening, closing theme tunes. But I think your point about Japanese folk music, one of the ways I first got into Japanese music is initially I heard like the pop rock, a lot of the singer-songwriters, and I really kind of enjoyed that. But then I listened to a lot of the folk music because I really like sort of as well as the folk side, but also the use of the traditional instruments, sort of having kotos and shamsons brought into that chamber instruments. And one thing, I just really loved the style of the writing, this kind of thing where, for example, I mean, you look at koto music especially, or music which is built around koto, there's this thing about they never resolve the note. They never resolve. I mean, you get all the way to the end of like a 10-minute arrangement, and that's when they'll resolve on the tonic note. They'll finish on the key. And I was watching another video by this really interesting, I've forgotten his name, unfortunately, but a really interesting guy who was talking about the Japanese style of songwriting, and he was talking about contemporary music, and he brought back the same point. And I was just kind of thinking, yeah, that's something that actually took me really into Japanese contemporary music, was the realization that there are lessons learned. As much as they use a lot of contemporary Western sounds, they're like the chord structure, this thing about they don't just go 4 notes resolve, 4 notes resolve. They'll keep a chord pattern unresolved for a very long period of time if that's the mood that they want to go for. So I think that's a very good way of getting into Japanese music, is through sort of seeing that similarity that does exist between the Japanese folk and the Japanese pop, that really permeates what makes pop music so interesting in Japan, in my opinion.
I think to some extent, last weekend I was still listening to the album of The Boom.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. That is actually a bit of a classic though, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I think to some extent the Japanese folk music, they have breed their pop music right now. And sometimes I think because sometimes when you heard enough like rock bands in Japan rock bands, it's a bit tired for your brain, if you know what I mean.
Yes, there can be a lot there.
Yes, and there's lots of instruments, and we just feel a little bit tired for both your ear and your brain. So at that time, I will go back to folk. It's a bit but yes, both folk music and some funk bands. Sometimes I will listen.
There's a big thing about funk, like a lot of funk music in Japan at the moment. But then again, I think that's a natural progression because you go back 20 years, there was a massive thing about infusing ska in Japanese music. Ska was massive. And also you've had Tokyo Ska Paradise Orchestra have made that into a career. But you also have like, I mean, everything like Otsukai was using loads of ska in her first couple of albums. And then like all of the other, you know, Chatmonchi were using ska. There was all these artists who were using that. And I think that's kind of developed into this much more keen ear for funk music that we hear in Japan. So that's a very good point as well, actually. But I do agree that there's those two areas of Japanese music you want to keep. You want to keep the stuff where it's just like a feast for the ears, where there's so much to get into. Yes. But you also want to keep yourself something nice and simple by the side to just help you relax afterwards. Like I need something to clear my palate a bit.
Yes. And for the former, I really wish I could go there. I could be in the side to watch them live. Many of them, like Raise A Suilen, for example, and also Love Bites and Perfume.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yes, and
now that's a show. That's a show. Yeah.
And if possible, Scandal.
Oh, it's so good to hear someone mention Scandal. Such an underappreciated band, Scandal.
Oh, really? I still think like they are the #1 girls band in the Japan right now. Not anymore.
Well, do you know, this is the interesting thing, actually, because this has become such a hot topic. But I think, I mean, so for example, you look at Scandal, and I think they're one of those bands where if you are in the radius of what Scandal are doing, then you're they're always there. They've always got something new. I mean, they released a new song like last night. And, you know, they've got all these new things happening. They're generally sort of beloved. They write their own songs. They're always like experimenting with their style.
Yes, yes.
But the thing is that I think that they're so well known because of their longevity. But in actuality, they're never like troubling the top of the charts. They're never particularly anywhere where they're going to be seen by the general public. They are kind of there and yet almost not there in the general sort of view. And so I think it's very interesting that, I mean, so this conversation came up, actually, I can't remember who it was, but someone actually questioned me, isn't Scandal the biggest of the girls' fans? And my argument was, I think that they would be argued to be one of the, certainly of this explosion that we've been experiencing over the last 15 years, they were kind of one of the groups right at the beginning. You know, they're alongside Chatmonchi, Stereo Pony, those kind of groups. They were one of the ones who started it off, and certainly have been the one who's lasted best. But I wouldn't say that in any way they're the most famous of them. They kind of like, you know, sometimes you get a group who everyone knows and yet no one knows what their last song was. It's like, oh yeah, I've heard of them. Are they still around? That kind of group. That's kind of what Scandal have become. Whereas, you know, you look at like at the moment, Bandmade are selling out bigger venues.
They are phenomenal.
Yeah, they're. I mean, see, even my followers are making sure that I have the hat. So my followers have got me nicely adorned so that my fandom can be worn and shown. But yeah, I mean, for example, they're kind of like in the band scene. They're the big thing. Love Bites are huge at the moment as well. Nemophila have become massive, and I think Nemophila are doing quite well in Japan as well. Like for example, Bandmade are doing better overseas than they're doing in Japan, in all honesty.
Really?
their success overseas is, I mean, they're doing okay in Japan, but overseas they're doing really well. And that's kind of had a noticeable bias. I mean, you see a lot of their tour dates, they're touring as much in America, if not more, than they are in Japan. I'm going to need someone, I'm going to need super fan to correct me.
Yeah, if they're touring to China, I think I will go.
I can't see any reason why not. I mean, I think they're focusing so much of their resources on America at the moment that might be limiting. Like, for example, they have had a limited number of European tour dates of recent, which has caused a lot of people to go, hey, over here. So I think they're trying to push the American market and then expand from there. But yeah, why not? So when you look at bands like Scandal are kind of they're still doing world tours, but they're playing to fans who already know them. They're not really trying to get any new fans. They're just like, hey.
Yes, and I think their fans like their stableness.
Yes, exactly. You know you're going to get something good. You know it's going to be something interesting. They never do exactly the same thing twice. They're reliably interesting, which is such a rare quality.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, because it's quite common that the artists want to change. They want to have experiments, but you will have two kind of voices. Someone support you and someone like your change and someone who don't. That's quite natural.
Well, I think that Scandal's last album, Mirror, was the most notable departure from their sound that they've ever had, and yet even then it was not like a massive overhaul. It still sounded like Scandal, but it was a very different feel. And then they've got their new song they released last night, which seems to be a bit more return to a slightly more central place, but you know, we're kind of waiting to see where they go with this. But one thing is, you know that whatever you get from Scandal, it's going to be reliably still Scandal, and yet it'll be a little bit different from anything you've heard before. And that's a very difficult balance they managed to keep going for 15 years now.
Yes, that's quite a great longevity, isn't it?
That's really impressive. Yeah. So
even though I was thinking about the Perfume, even Perfume actually I think they have maybe I'm wrong, but I had this feeling that they are, how to say, like more for a more lighter music, like probably since 2015 or 2016, not as technical as they used to be.
Definitely.
Yes, but more pop or even like pop.
I feel like Nakati Yasutaka's kind of become very aware that his production sound is a bit familiar, and so you know, he had obviously the original successes with Perfume were massive, and you know, and then Kyari Pami Pami, then he's running two artists who both kind of have his signature sound. And I think there became that point where he was like, okay, I kind of have to do something a little bit different here, or people are going to get tired of this. So he's kind of tried to change it a bit, but I think he's done that by slightly moving more towards the Western sound. So, you know, you're getting Kyari Pami Pami and Perfume both performing Coachella, you know, concerts. And, you know, you can tell he's trying to do a sound that's going to be more appealing to a Western audience. So I feel like he kind of had his original sound, but he's scared of repeating it too much. So now he's just kind of going for more of a general pleasing sound for pop audiences. Yeah, I mean, I've always had. Yeah, so I was going to say, I've always had like massive respect for Perfume, because they're one of those groups where whatever you think of them from what they are, which I know often splits fans quite a lot. I think the thing which goes without saying is that it's so impressive to see three women who are not the idol age, but are out there. They're like nailing dance moves better than like women half their age. They've got the personality. They've just got everything. They are nailing the pop thing 100%, and they're still relevant. For me, that I really am impressed by that. I really like. I always want Perfume to do well, because I'm just like, yes, just what you're doing. We need more of that.
Yeah, and that is also the reason that if I got the chance, like like the visa is open to us, if the visa, Japanese tourist visa is open to us
It
again.
will be. It will be.
It was much harder to come to Japan from my own country, from China.
Yeah.
And when I was still in UK, it's much easier if I were in UK and I apply for a Japan visa and then I come to Japan to watch a live performance. And for Perfume, for Perfume and for Love Bites, I really want to go there to see the live. Yeah. I think live is totally different, but like probably for the more folk side of the Japanese music, it's way better to have their record and to put it into your machine and to play it for a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, just because then you've got your environment, you've got your space, your relaxation, you put it on and you're just in a good place. Well, just interesting. I just want to sort of bridge that gap though, because talking about the whole thing of like traditional music, I'm gonna make this work. I'm gonna make this segue work. Traditional music working with like modern contemporary music. What were your feelings, or do you have any feelings on Wagaki Band?
Sorry, what
do you
band?
know Wagaki Band?
Wagaki?
Okay, Wagaki Band would be one definitely worth checking out. They are basically they're kind of like a contemporary rock group, but they have members who play guitar, bass, drums, and then they have a shamisen player, a koto player, a shakuhachi player, and their singer. I would say possibly I'm going to completely shit out and go #no bias. I think just the greatest voice on the player. Her voice is just gorgeous. And she manages to sing sort of contemporary music, but in the traditional Japanese style. Absolutely fantastic. So I would definitely recommend Wagaki Band. That's my recommendation for the day. Now, I've kept you for a while, so I'm going to move you to a little question that you might have noticed. This is a question that I ask for every single person who I do one of these chats with. Because this question is our opportunity for you to add to our wonderful collection of answers we've had to this. I ask every person who comes on here to name, and it can be anything in the world, 2 things that if you had the choice, you would completely and utterly get rid of. It can be a concept, it can be something global, it can be something tiny within your house and day-to-day irritation or a one-time thing. Just because, as we always say on this channel, it's fine to like things, but it's also fine to dislike things. Honesty is the goal after all. So I'm kind of interested. Did you have any thoughts on this? Are there any 2 things in this world that you think the world would be better if we just got rid of? 2 things we could erase completely from the world.
Yeah, when you sent me that message, that really questioned me. And I had, I thought...
I forewarned you.
Yeah, I thought quite hard, and it's so hard. Probably I would say the first thing is office hour.
Office hours.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to press you slightly on this. So what about office hours is the problem?
Because I'm becoming a university teacher for the whole sake of not sitting in my office. I think the whole point for me to getting my doctorate degree is not to sit in my office. I can arrange my time freely to work. Yeah, to work in the Starbucks, in the coffee shop, or working in my home. Sometimes I go to the office if I wish. That's my whole point of becoming a university teacher.
So I'm gonna present this possibility to you though, because I mean I'm lucky I don't have to work on office hours. I kind of work around my own schedule, but there might be people who suggest that for a lot of folks office hours increase productivity because they don't have the desire, the same motivation. Maybe they don't enjoy their jobs as much as we do. So Are we suggesting that maybe if we remove office hours, we could cause the downfall of society?
But like nowadays, even we are in the post-COVID era. Many jobs, both in the Europe and in the UK and in North America as well, throughout the world, I think probably except China. But in many places throughout the world, so the working mode is rather on-site or hybridity. So by hybridity, they mean you can work both remotely or on-site. So I think it's the trend to work in a more flexible way, and it's the trend. But it's the trend for more and more people who work like us, who are not going to the office on a daily basis, but just walking to the office if they really need to. I think yes.
It encourages creativity, doesn't it? You're doing away with the old.
So probably not the office hour per se, but the mandatory regulation. Or I would call it the fascist regulation to force you sit in the office 9 to 6 with low productivity.
Do you know, I love that you've by adding the word fascist into this, you've made it impossible for me to refuse. So and plus the fact that you said 9 to 6 when every single person in the UK right now is going 9 to 6, which don't you mean 9 to 5, just shows me how hard you've already worked. So that's right. Don't worry. From tomorrow, we will eradicate the old office hours. They are gone. Freedom will reign. So your first one, I think we can all agree with that. So what is your second item for eradication from the world?
Well, how about something I will never eradicate in the world instead of the second thing?
Okay. Oh, so something that you insist on keeping.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there something you insist on keeping?
I would say music, but it is a little bit cliche. So instead, probably I will see every technology that we can use to pertain the existence of music, like recording technology or video technology, everything that can help us
to protect it. Sorry.
To protect it. Yeah.
That's that's a lovely idea, because you hear so many times about they always talk about how data storage, we think about like the data storage of things like YouTube and all these places where we just assume they will be forever, but then you hear about actually there is a lot of potential weaknesses to these things, potential weaknesses, how these things could disappear if not properly protected, and how much work has to go into keeping these kind of networks alive. And it does make you think, imagine if something like YouTube disappeared, or like some of these services disappeared, would be back to those old days where, you kind of hear people say, oh, there was this recording of this band playing this in 1953, but all the recordings are gone and we'll never see it again. You never want to go back to that world where a recording can disappear forever.
Yes. There's a very interesting argument in theater studies, because I'm originally a theater scholar. So there is argue that which one is better, the live performance, the live theater performance, you've been there, you watched the live, or the recordings, the videos. So like it's very common to say that, it's very interesting, like every theater scholar, they demonstrated that live performance is way better than the records than the videos, but most of them, they use the videos to analyze their performance to write academic papers.
Well, this is a conversation which has been following me round really for about 5 years now. Like every time we have this conversation so often. And if I'm going to review an artist I've never heard before, someone will always give me a live link and say, check this out first. And I always say, no, I'm not starting with the live performance. Partly because it's a recording of a live performance, which therefore is something of a bit of a, you know, it's almost a contradiction in terms.
Something is losing.
Yeah. And the other reason as well is that I feel that because you're not there, as you say, you're losing that experience of being there. But the other thing as well for me is the fact that I feel that when it comes to music, a live version, at least with contemporary music, a live version is an interpretation of the record. So the record is where you went into a studio and you used every piece of technology available to get the song exactly right. And then live is how you can expand upon it for your fans. So there's a very popular song by, well, I'll use the Bandmate example again, by Bandmate, who I really like it. I really like the song, really like it. When they do it live, they do this extended 2-minute long guitar solo. If I was listening to that version, I wouldn't like it because it sounds messy, it sounds unfocused, it loses direction, and then the last chorus comes in sounding very kind of like, you know, it's like it's been too long, the momentum's gone. But if I was there in person watching it performed, I would love that. But only because I know the original song and I know what is being extended. So it's the fact that for me, I know that that 2-minute guitar solo is an extension of where there wouldn't be a 2-minute guitar. It feels like I'm getting extra. It feels like, oh, I'm being given something more. Whereas if I just heard that, I'd be like, why is this song so unfocused? Why is it so messy in the middle? So I think that's the case in music. I don't know if that necessarily translates into theatre, though, because with theatre, you have a piece that's written to be a theatrical piece, a live piece. You know, it's written for a stage setting, and then you have a movie will be written for a movie. And very often when you have one which transfers to the other, you can very much tell that they've had to adapt it. So I would suspect that's, for me, that's the difference between the musical stage versus recording comparison and the theatrical comparison.
For me, now I can acquire this idea that for the theater records and or for example, like the National Theatre Live, those kind of technology to preserve the performance and the performance per se, that it's just different two ways of interpreting the performance itself. It's not one better, one worse. It's just different. And probably for me, music, whether music records or live performance is the same. And also because, again, live performance, you go there for once and it's gone. What you have is the memory and probably the recordings, probably the music videos. But as you said, it's just like there's something missing in the music video. But for the records, it's the complete original expression of what they want to express in the recording. So even now, it's already you can listen to music easily on Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal. But for my favorite music, I will still go records.
Yeah, so sometimes it's nice to have the recorded version. And you know, I think it's nice for posterity to make sure, like you say, it's not lost. I think maybe the way I would sum it up, though, is to say that if I play someone an old recording of some band from, I don't know, from the 60s, and I play it, they'll listen to it and they'll enjoy it. And they go, oh, this is good, nice. If I play them an old live recording of that band from the 60s, you'll always hear that phrase, oh, I wish I'd been there. I wonder what it would have been like to be there. You can tell by them watching the recording that even if they don't know it, they're registering that something's missing, that they're not actually experiencing it. When they listen to the studio recording, they're experiencing it. But when they're watching that recording, even though it's been saved, even though they can watch it anytime they want, it's never really going to be it. You know, it's never really going to be being there. And I think there is something about live you kind of, it sounds terrible to say because there's so many people who don't get to go to these shows, but you know, if you're not there, you're kind of only ever going to be able to kind of have a half experience of it. It's very strange that. Yeah, that would be my final conclusion on the live versus recorded argument. It's going to get so much hate in the comments for this. Just if you are commenting telling me I'm wrong, please understand I really don't care. But anyway, please do comment. Look, it has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much. I know you've stuck around for this much longer than originally I told you it was going to last, but it has been a real pleasure to talk to you. We're recording this on Wednesday for anyone who's wondering. You might have picked up from some of my comments earlier, but we're going to be posting this on the weekend, as you've obviously already worked out as well, dear viewers. And it's part of our whole BangDream celebration for the 6th anniversary. So please do remember, if you're tuning in for some BangDream content, we've also got some extra reviews we've done. We're talking about the new Morphonica album, a bunch of stuff that's coming up. So please do have a little dig around in the channel, and I'm sure there'll be more content for you to see. But yeah, before we sort of call a close to it, any sort of final thoughts, anything you want to add there, or anything that you might be promoting? I don't know if there's anything that you do, any stuff that you're involved with that might be nice to point people towards.
Okay, as this is let's say, as this is to celebrate the 6th anniversary of BangDream, and although I know there's different voices about this Say You Idol band project, and some's looking forward, someone said, oh, BangDream is going down. But I am still keeping my eye on this project, and because they are doing something quite interesting and to some extent also avant-garde. So keep an eye on it, and let's see what they will do for the new band Michael and the new mysterious band, which will release in the couple of months. And also still, I'm looking forward to the new live performance of Roselia and the Popping Party and Raise a Suilen and the Morphonica in this coming year. So yes, and it's really nice to talk to you.
You too. And for the second time, as you say. And I've got to confess, like with the whole BangDream thing, as you say, I think it's very easy to see it as a surface level thing, see it as a series of games, see it as an animation. But there is so much. I mean, as we mentioned, they managed to foster 2 entirely different fan bases through this whole thing. So many groups. There's the live aspect. There is the animated aspect. There's just so much to take in. And I would encourage people to dig a little bit deeper because it's absolutely worth it. Yeah, so a big thank you again for coming and having this chat with me. I'll stay on the line with you just for a little bit longer, but first of all, I'm just going to say goodbye to all of you folks at home. So thank you so much for tuning in. You have yourselves a lovely day. Check out more content on the channel should you find yourself with a bit of free time. And until I hopefully see you very soon in Japan for the next one of these. For now, ciao, ciao.